What if I told you someone turned 3 rusted metal boxes into a home so insane, people actually stopped their cars just to stare? Not a rough, cold metal shed. We're talking heated floors, a designer kitchen, and massive glass walls that dissolve straight into the desert. And the craziest part, the guy who pulled this off had zero construction experience. So stick with me, because this story is wild from start to finish. His name is Ben, a designer and creative problem solver who refuses to accept impossible. He had one dream: build a home from shipping containers. But buried permits, hidden costs, and zero clear answers nearly killed the project before it began. Most people would have quit. Ben the Resistance made him obsessed. Spring 2018, Ben drops cash on 10 raw acres in Joshua Tree, drawn to a natural hill, sitting dead center on the land. Before the ink on the survey even dried, he made his first power move, ordering 3 brand-new one-trip shipping containers, the only ones legally approved for residential construction in California. But before a single wall goes up, before the first tool even touches steel, there's a critical step almost every YouTube video skips completely. Most viewers watching container builds have never seen this part. Every hollow cavity beneath the floor gets packed tight with rigid insulation. Then the subfloor drops down and buries it forever. Here's where things get seriously interesting. Window frames get fully fabricated before a single wall is even approached. Why does that matter? The moment a grinder hits a container's steel skin, the entire structural system starts to fail. So the reinforcement has to be ready to drop in the second the cut is complete. Steel tubes get measured, marked, sliced, and welded into locked rectangular frames. Each piece slots in deliberately until the whole assembly becomes one rigid, unbreakable unit. The first cut doesn't go as planned. The gap between frame and wall comes out wider than engineered. Welding closes it, but the real cost is the lesson burned into the team's brain. Slow down. Precision now saves disaster later, because every single decision going forward is stacked on top of this one. The second opening, noticeably cleaner. Tighter edges, fewer corrections, less grinding backward. And that's actually the hidden rhythm powering this entire build. Mistakes don't vanish here. They transform into the exact knowledge that prevents the next one. Here's what most people completely miss about cutting containers. Everyone thinks it's just a design decision. It's actually a structural crisis in slow motion. That corrugated outer steel shell is the entire skeleton of the box. Slice through it, and you've severed the load path that keeps everything standing. That's why every single opening, window, doorway, glass wall demands serious engineered reinforcement before anything else happens. Steel tubing gets welded around each cut, redirecting the structural load around the opening rather than letting it collapse into the weakest point. Without that steel bypass, the container begins to rack and twist under pressure, especially once units get stacked or heavy finishes get added above. Corner zones around door frames get extra attention because stress concentrates there over years. Larger openings demand heavier gauge steel, bigger framing members, and temporary shoring to keep the whole system stable mid-cut. Real structural integrity isn't one big move. It's 100 small ones executed perfectly. Once the openings are locked down, a quieter transformation starts happening inside. Timber framing climbs up the interior walls, and this isn't decorative. It's load-bearing engineering. Because those steel cuts interrupted the original structural path, the timber frame steps in and creates an entirely new one from scratch. Connecting wood to steel, though, that's where the project gets punishing. Brackets sink into the lumber first, then self-tapping screws battle their way into the container's steel skeleton. Every single fastener fights back. It's grinding, exhausting work. But skipping it isn't an option. Extra blocking fills spots that look completely unnecessary at this stage. But it's all intentional. Those blocks are already reserved for drywall edges, plywood attachment points, and finish layers that exist right now only inside Ben's head, fully mapped out before they're visible to anyone else. Ceiling joists rise up but get deliberately left floating. Insulation runs, sprinkler lines, and concealed mechanical systems all need to weave through that overhead cavity before anything permanent gets sealed above. Early on, window frames get built from basic square steel tubing, functional, but brutally unforgiving. Cuts need to be surgical. Alignment needs to be nearly flawless. One measurement off by a fraction, and the entire frame fights you from that point forward. Then the approach shifts to angle steel, and suddenly everything starts clicking. Alignment wants to happen naturally. Gaps close without fighting. Progress stops feeling like damage control and starts feeling like actual momentum. That's the pattern running under this entire build. The method keeps getting smarter. Each iteration takes what the last one proved and throws out everything it exposed as wrong. One of the most jaw-dropping decisions in the whole project, a pair of enormous bifold glass walls installed parallel to each other on opposite sides. Not chosen for function, chosen for transformation. When those panels fold completely open, the interior ceases to exist as a separate space. The living room in the Mojave Desert become the same room. But that visual magic has a brutal price. Every oversized glass opening means more structural steel gets cut, more original strength gets sacrificed, more reinforcement has to compensate. Ben knew the full cost going in. He approved it anyway. Natural light, visual openness, and raw connection to the landscape outweighed preserving the original steel box. Where door frames land against the corrugated steel skin, microscopic air channels form, invisible pathways for heat, moisture, and outside air to sneak through. Fire-rated expanding foam gets injected deep into every one of those gaps, swelling into every crack until the entire boundary is permanently sealed. Here's the thing nobody says out loud about this project. Not one person on this crew had ever built a shipping container home before. Every single technique was invented in real time. They'd test a method on one section, watch how it actually performed under real conditions, then decide whether to run it across the entire structure or scrap it completely. One end wall gets fully insulated and sheathed in OSB as a live experiment before anyone commits to anything else. The floor system gets its own engineered solution. Insulated subfloor panels combining oriented strand board bonded directly to rigid foam underneath. But in the third container, the team pivots entirely. Rigid foam boards drop straight onto existing plywood, topped with a final plywood layer. No single perfect answer, just ruthless commitment to whatever actually works. The structural engineer mandates half-inch sheathing across every interior wall. Non-negotiable. The team cuts and nails every panel exactly to spec. And since this sits inside Joshua Tree's jurisdiction, a full fire sprinkler network has to run through the entire structure. That entire system goes in before a single wall gets closed. Then the drywall crew arrives and immediately breaks everyone's expectations. What would consume a normal team for weeks gets finished in 2 days. Panels fly up, mud and tape disappear into every seam. Trim locks every corner tight. A full skim coat transforms the entire interior from raw framing into smooth, clean, finished walls in what feels like a single breath. Entire living landscape. When Ben first acquired the land, nobody could confirm whether power or water even existed within reach. He investigated himself, using satellite imagery to trace nearby utility infrastructure before picking up the phone. Electricity turned out to be accessible, but a new transformer had to be commissioned first. The main panel and meter went in near the road. Underground conduit tied all three containers together, and a battery storage system was integrated to capture and bank solar energy overnight. When exterior paint day finally arrived, Ben kept the decision brutally simple. He walked into Home Depot, locked in on PPG timeless exterior in a deep, commanding charcoal with a dead-flat matte finish, and committed on the spot. A professional named Henry handled the application. And the moment that color hit the steel, something shifted. The charcoal against the bleached desert landscape looked like something out of an architecture magazine. The project stopped looking like containers and started radiating genuine luxury. Because this structure sits in California, earthquake engineering isn't optional, it's law. The team drills through steel, welds heavy plate steel over the corner casting blocks, and drives oversized threaded rods deep into the concrete foundation below. Then, high-strength anchoring epoxy gets injected throughout the entire assembly, chemically bonding the steel, concrete, and threaded rods into one monolithic system. At that point, the house doesn't rest on the foundation anymore. It's molecularly fused to it. Ground movement becomes the foundation's problem, not the structure's. Shipping containers sound enormous until insulation and framing eat the interior alive. The usable width drops to just over 7 feet, tight by any standard. But that constraint is exactly what makes the Galley kitchen layout pure genius in this space. One wall becomes the entire cooking zone. The opposite wall transforms into a floor-to-ceiling pantry and cabinet system. Clean, logical, and ruthlessly functional. The majority of materials came directly off Home Depot shelves, which makes the finished result feel almost unfairly achievable. Ben's backsplash choice adds something unexpected: hexagonal tiles installed with a deliberate off-grid rotation, giving the wall surface a subtle directional energy. Just enough visual movement to catch the eye without demanding attention. Then the solid oak floating shelves go in, and the atmosphere in the room physically changes. That warm, natural grain against bright white walls erases every memory of corrugated steel. The space stops being a converted container. It becomes a home you'd actually want to live in. Here's one of the cleverest spatial decisions in the entire project. The bathroom doesn't hide in a corner. It sits dead center between the kitchen and bedroom, and instead of surrounding it with dead-end hallways, they made it fully walk-through. 2 doors, 0 wasted circulation space. Inside, a waterproof membrane goes over the greenboard base first. Hex tiles install piece by piece over cement board that locks the entire floor system solid before a single tile sees adhesive. The shower build demands a surgeon's precision. The frameless glass enclosure anchors directly into the finished tile walls, which sounds manageable until you realize one misplaced drill bit shatters everything you just spent days installing. But the detail that genuinely stops people is the flooring transition. Hex tile bleeds organically from the bathroom into warm wood in the bedroom. No visible seam, no threshold strip, no jarring line. It simply flows. Achieving that required raising the wood floor fractionally so both surfaces land at identical height. The team then uses actual tile offcuts as physical cutting templates, pressing them against the wood to trace the exact organic edge where one material gives way to the other. You won't consciously notice it walking through, but you'll feel the difference immediately. The guest bedroom strips everything back. Wide plank engineered hardwood in a whitewashed French oak finish. Click-lock installation that moves fast and looks expensive. A platform bed frame raises sleeping height 12 inches off the floor, not a style choice, a function-first decision. That gap becomes dedicated luggage storage, specifically engineered for Airbnb guests arriving with rolling bags into a compact space. Antique white stain cools the oak undertones slightly. Linen panels hang from a rod mounted above the headboard wall, cascading down on both sides to create a full canopy effect that makes a tight room read as intentionally intimate rather than cramped. Electrical access gets the same design attention. A precision-cut grommet opening in the platform frame lets charging cables pass through invisibly. A narrow, floating shelf beneath the window becomes the perfect bedside surface. Book, phone, water glass, all within arm's reach, without a separate nightstand eating floor space. The smart shower control panel for the connected bathroom disappears into a wall cavity on the shared wall, completely flush, completely hidden. What started as 3 surplus metal containers sitting in the Mojave Desert became a home that proves one thing above everything else. Constraints don't limit great design, they create it. When comfort isn't an option, creativity has no choice but to show up. And those are exactly the kinds of builds worth obsessing over. If that's the content you want more of, subscribe right now, because what's coming next makes this look like the warm-up.